Good evening, and I welcome you to our webinar and our discussion this evening. My name is Nonku Hlongwa, and I am the Deputy Chairperson in the Policy and Research Committee of the BMF. I represent my Chairperson, Rulanga Mankrela. I hope he's online and has joined us. And with me, Gralintate Masupa Mushresh. Today, we're discussing the inaugural country investment strategy that hits all of us and the market. We didn't know they're working on it, and that demonstration, we were all quiet. We didn't realize that they're working on this, on a document like this to improve investment. We've seen the president having lots of engagements for jobs, for infrastructure, and we all thought, why are they wasting so much time with engagements? What does this mean? But it comes together with this investment strategy. And that I'm sure normally we say that the government is not aligned. And I want to commend you from us in the BMF that this document is aligned to the NDP, to the infrastructure plan of 2050. And we really impressed with that. And we thank you for joining us this evening from the Office of the President. And it's an honor for us in the BMF to host you. And we know that you also used to be a member of the BMF. So yeah, can I just do a brief introduction of you, if you don't mind?
Thanks very much, Nonku, and to all your members. So my name is Masupa Mushresh. I am the Green Economy Specialist in the Investment and Infrastructure Office in the Presidency. I joined some 2 and a bit years ago when the office was formed at the 3rd iteration of the South Africa Investment Conference. The president appointed Dr. Josienzo Ramokgopa to head up this new function. And the purpose of it was to create this alignment and a focused area of delivery in terms of investment coordination, in terms of meeting the president's ambition of raising an additional $100 billion over the 6th administration in terms of foreign direct investment and domestic direct investment. And on the other side of it, from the infrastructure side, creating a single portal of entry for what we call catalytic or strategic integrated projects. And these are projects that have a large impact in terms of stimulating aggregate demand as a way for us to stimulate the supply side of the economy. But happy to talk about that a bit more whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you very much. Your name is interesting, firstly. Masupa was Mushesh's third son. You are Masupa Musheshe, so I think your parents named you aptly to lead this during this difficult time. Before we got online, I was telling that Musheshe that he's got a difficult job because he's sitting in load shedding and he's talking to us about investment promotion and investment attraction. But also we're dealing with a high unemployment rate. We're dealing with a dwindling economy, a very robust political atmosphere. So I'm sure you have very tough conversations and very tough sleepless nights when you go through what you go through. But we would like to commend you for the work you're doing for the country, for us, and for the future of this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of joining government has been a bit of a calling. I wouldn't want to sound too sentimental about it, but you know, if you asked me 2.5 years ago if I'd ever work for government, I probably would have laughed in your face. But here I am, and sort of enjoying the opportunity, I guess, to serve and to make a contribution towards, you know, the embetterment of the country and to create this pipeline of opportunity that business can then execute. You know, I have been a project developer sort of before joining the presidency. I was in private equity for about 10 years, focusing on green, looked at sort of solar PV on a willing buyer, willing seller basis, which was a bit before its time. I guess now it would be relatively opportune in the context of the lifting of the 100 megawatt embedded generation cap. Looked at projects that looked at water reuse, and we've got massive water challenges, and also looked at waste management from a recycling and sustainability perspective, and we have massive waste management challenges. So I guess it's bringing a business and finance voice to some of these policy discussions with a view of creating an environment which is more conducive for the private sector to participate. I mean, the situation we find ourselves in is that the fiscus is constrained. You know, we went into COVID on the back foot financially. We had been recently downgraded. Our growth rates have been anemic, you know, for the last decade. And COVID itself has had a devastating impact on the economy. We have been fortunate in terms of the recovery to have recovered to pre-pandemic levels sooner than we had hoped, off the back of the commodities boom. But it has been in a way which is, our employment levels have not recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and South Africa has this history of non-job creative growth. So that creates its own challenges, and it's ones that we are constantly trying to respond to. But, you know, the challenges are significant, but from a business perspective, it also means that there are opportunities to substantively partner with government. It also does mean that government has to sort of listen to business and understand what is required to create the conducive environment for investment to happen. I mean, from my experience, irrespective of how great your business plan is, if it lands in an environment which is not conducive to its execution, it won't succeed. And in many instances, what is required is for government to create that conducive environment rather than, you know, creating sort of stimulus instruments, though there is a role for that, and the country investment strategy speaks to some of those. But yeah, I mean, I think from a business perspective, we would love to hear what the views are on this document. There is opportunity to shape it and reshape it. It's not a document that's set in stone and we're going through this as a tick box exercise. In reality, everyone who's out there doing investment promotion for their own business, their own sector, has experience in terms of dealing with domestic and foreign funders and clients. And this, if this document doesn't in some way respond to your lived reality, there's an opportunity to give commentary, hopefully written commentary, which gives us an opportunity to shape it such.
Okay, no, thank you. So our leadership starts at a student level and then all the way to professionals into C-suite. So I always like to start off by saying why, keep it basic first, and tell us why would you even go to strategy, and then where does it mean to getting into law? So if you can just take us to that journey as where you are now and where do you come from and where we're going by this engagement.
All right, so when Dr. Ramokgopa was appointed, the first two things that he was tasked with I've mentioned, in terms of coordinating the work around investment promotion, in terms of meeting this ambition of raising an additional $100 billion in terms of foreign direct investment. And in terms of that, at the last iteration of the South Africa Investment Conference, we were there or thereabout in terms of pledges towards that 1.2 trillion rand. The second one, like I said, was creating this coordinated manner for infrastructure delivery from a government perspective. Infrastructure delivery is multi-departmental, but you needed to create this sort of aggregate view and centralized a way in which it is approached such that we could take take advantage of economies of scale more and have some element of checks and balances in terms of how infrastructure is delivered and looking at the range of projects and their dynamics from province to province, from district to district. The final one was a request by the president for Dr. Ramokgopa and the office to develop a country investment strategy. It's probably the one element of our 3 deliverables that we have not spoken sufficiently about. As you said, it seemed to sort of come out of nowhere. It really was not. It was one of our KPIs from the beginning. And the purpose of it is you need to have this element of sort of policy alignment in terms of how investment promotion is done in South Africa. So in a South African context, you have sort of the 3 levels of government, national, provincial, local government. They all have original powers in the constitution. So a lot of people don't understand that sort of presidency and national government coordination is done sort of through an intergovernmental relation framework rather than a top-down kind of instruction approach to other legs of government. But what this means, though, is that you have a proliferation in government of investment promotion agencies, over 30 of them, that exist at a national government like Invest SA or Brand SA, others that exist for different departments at a national government level, others that exist for provinces like Westgrow for the Western Cape and Cape Town, others that exist at a municipal level. And the challenge that you have is that you can find that if this is not coordinated, we are sort of speaking against each other, and in other ways competing against each other to the detriment of the country. So Dr. Ramokgopa gives the example, and I use it anecdotally, but I think it sort of signifies the challenge, is that when he was executive mayor of the city of Tshwane, they did an investment promotion trip to China. I can't remember where exactly it was, but it wasn't like Beijing or Shanghai. It wasn't, one of the main centers. They went and were well received, gave a good account of why it was attractive for this entity to invest in South Africa and specifically in the city of Tshwane. They thought they had a good meeting, and as they were walking out, in the reception was sitting another delegation from somewhere else in South Africa. So not ideal, as you can imagine. So that element of sort of creating this forum for collaboration, but also importantly what the CIS does is create a fact and data-based approach to talking about what the specific advantages of different territories are. So the advantages of the Northern Cape and what it should be focusing on is different to Gauteng, is different to the Eastern Cape. There are some areas where naturally competition will happen, but hopefully this creates the framework for discussion and more collaboration rather than competition. And at the same time, it sends out a message to the rest of the world and to entities in South Africa, because we're not just focusing on foreign direct investment, but also domestic direct investment is what we see as nascent industries and where we see opportunities for growth. Those are called the 5 big frontiers. And at the same time, how we're looking to support existing industries. So hopefully it gives sort of this framework and parameter across these 3 different elements. And ultimately that's what it seeks to do and why we did it.
Thank you. So what happens after the act, after the strategy? What's the next steps legally, if you can just take us through the journey?
Sure. So it's not the first policy document that has come out of the Investment and Infrastructure Office, or what it has morphed into called Infrastructure South Africa. The first one was the National Infrastructure Plan 2050 Phase 1. So that speaks to what we call sort of network industries, and it talks to bulk infrastructure in those industries. So it talks to the network industries being water, electricity, digital communication, and freight transport. And it doesn't talk to the distributed or reticulated infrastructure at a municipal level, but talks to the bulk infrastructure sort of at a national level. Like in water, it would be the dams instead of the wastewater treatment works, if you, or the large-scale generation facilities in electricity, the power stations, rather than the transmission and distribution infrastructure. So that lays a framework and a plan and is gazetted under the Infrastructure Development Act. And this is the second piece to that. There's a second parallel piece, which is phase 2 of the NIP, the National Infrastructure Plan 2050, now under development, and will go through a process in terms of development and then public consultation, which is where we are now. Post-public consultation, we'll do a review of all of the commentary and an update of the document. So like I said, it is the best time, I guess, to be engaging with it because it is a live document at the moment. Post that, there's sort of administrative steps that we must go through, and we ultimately take it back to Cabinet for approval. And once approved, it gets gazetted as the strategy document. Yeah, so that whole process could take anywhere from, so the public consult process was open for 30 days up until the 27th of last month. We've extended it by 30 days. So up until the 27th of July. The sort of reconfiguration process, depending on how many comments we get, will probably take anywhere between 1 and 3 months. And then thereafter, we'll take it through the administrative process back to Cabinet for approval. And then ultimately it's gazetting as a policy document. And then it's embedding as part of the KPIs of the different departments in terms of how it functions and the structures that it proposes on how to coordinate investment promotion in the country. So that's sort of where we are and the next steps for it.
Okay, thank you very much. So the strategy.
I'm going into too much detail or not enough detail.
No, it was sufficient. Thank you. Because it's very good to just give the journey, because not everyone is sort of knows how these strategies come about and how the alignment works. It just feels like government is just issuing so many documents. So that you gave a good background and framework on the journey.
Yeah, look, I mean, the focus though is even under its development, it is not a document that it's in test, but it is a document that is informing how we approach some of these different things. So I'll give a good example. So one of the areas that if you do the sort of analysis of a place like the Northern Cape, we'll say the Northern Cape has a lot of land. It's bigger than Germany as a country. It's our largest province. It has a big coastline. It has about 330 kilometers of coastline. And it has an abundance of renewable energy, both solar, irradiation, and wind. Cool. And then it doesn't have a lot of people. It has 1.3 million people, and therefore it has sort of large tracts of land that are available for it to be used for renewable energy. About a year and a half ago, we started sort of responding to what we see as new market opportunities in the renewable energy space driven by green hydrogen, which is one of the big 5 frontiers. And if you look at the location coefficient for the Northern Cape, it ticks a box that this is a very good area of potential growth for the province, right? But the province also has a history of being the home for 60% of renewable energy projects, but it hasn't necessarily changed the makeup of the province in terms of helping the province meet its industrialization objectives, and playing a greater role in that element around the production elements of the supply chain. So we then partnered with the Northern Cape just over a year ago in responding to what we see as sort of the new paradigms in green hydrogen. And these are green hydrogen as an opportunity to create a commodity for export, linked to hard to abate sectors, as well as potential for decarbonizing carbon intensive industries in South Africa. To move quite quickly, it takes quite a long time to develop a national strategy and the consultation process that you must go through. But we needed to respond to the market quite quickly and put up our hand in terms of playing a role in this new paradigm of green hydrogen. So the world was like waiting for South Africa to send a message around, yes, we understand, and we have a long history in terms of looking at green hydrogen from a mobility and PGM perspective. DSI has done amazing work in that space, but this new opportunity needed a quicker sort of response. So we went from, first discussions to a developed and approved strategy by the provincial cabinet, and we launched it at COP in a period of 6 months. But it was off of the back of the fact that these were part of the inherent advantages that the Northern Cape had. So therefore we were in a position to generate a provincial strategy, which was informed by these elements and also speaks to how the Northern Cape sees this new and nascent industry responding to its ambitions to industrialize. So some of these elements and processes are not waiting for the strategy to be finished going through public consultation and through the whole story that I mentioned. These are sort of live examples that, we implement on an ongoing basis.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. That was a good example to show how, as we move and grow, we need to harmonize and move as one. So you're already doing it, and thank you for that example.
Sure.
So the strategy right now is anchored on a few certain sectors, so not even a few, quite a lot of sectors. Members, the sectors that are focused as finance, insurance, real estate, and business services. If you could unpack what is business services. The next one is transport and logistics, manufacturing, mining and quarrying, electricity, gas and water, agriculture, and the last one is agro-processing. So if you can just unpack how you chose these sectors, unpack what is business services, and also how come tourism is not part of the focus sectors, looking at how it took such a knock on after COVID.
Sure. So the first thing is, I had spoken around sort of the development of this methodology for prioritization of sectors. And this is not only at a national level, but at a provincial level. And one of the feedback that we got when we first took this to cabinet was they wanted to see the provinces and the metros feature more strongly in the document, as well as what their individual strategies look like. So the sort of first part of that is this element around creating a model that looks at the economic development objectives, job creation, GDP growth, etc. It looks at the market trends and demand analysis, the history of gross fixed capital formation, what the fixed capital stocks look like and the trends, as well as the competitive positioning of each province relative to the location. So what are the location benchmarkings, et cetera, okay? So that then gave this data-driven prioritization approach. And then it effectively focused on sort of a weighting on two elements. One was sort of investment, and then the other one was economic impact. Okay. So that gave a set of sectors that were then suggested for prioritization based on each of those individual elements. And then the weightings were then sort of changed to see what impact it would have in terms of the sensitivity on a greater sort of focus on economic impact instead of, let's say, an equal rating, a greater allocation in terms of economic impact. But the numbers sort of and the sector prioritization looked roughly the same. But this sort of element needs to happen within a policy performance prioritization framework. So like you said, we already have the National Development Plan, we have the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, we have the sort of multiple other strategies that tell us what we as a country are looking to promote. And ultimately what the model came back to tell us what do these sectors look like when you take all of these elements into account. So the sort of two that we've spoken about, the economic impact as well as then this policy performance. And then it came back to the ones that you spoke about, which are the finance and insurance. And I mean, we know that South Africa has sort of deep capital markets. We are a leader within the space in terms of sort of financial performance. You also are sort of business services, so that would include things like auditing, accounting, legal, so other services related to finance and insurance, asset management, et cetera, et cetera. And then sort of transport, storage, and communication. So that then also fits in with what we talk about in terms of the network sectors. So not just transport, but specifically sort of freight transport, port development, rail development, the switch of freight from road to rail, and that strategy. In terms of communication, we're looking at sort of fiber infrastructure and the development of 5G networks. You're looking at how these can be expanded into peri-urban areas as well as rural communities. You're looking at manufacturing. What does this mean in terms of the localization of production and ultimately construction because of its sort of very direct link in terms of stimulating the supply side in response to infrastructure development. So job creation, cement production, brick manufacturing, and all of those associated things which goes with the building of things. So it doesn't say those are the only 4 sectors that we focus on. It says also as a strategy, how do we continue to support existing areas of focus, and tourism is a good example. So from a tourism perspective, a lot of work has been done in terms of making the process for application of visas to be an electronic and a more seamless process, especially for some of our large markets like China. So it doesn't look at, let's say, these sectors from in the absence of looking to support things like tourism, but tourism doesn't have as much of a knock-on impact on the rest of the economy and on the supply side of the economy like construction does, if that makes sense, which is why these ones rate higher in terms of area of focus.
No, understood. No, understood. Thank you for that. And how are you matching our own developmental agenda with this? Because we know there's been a criticism that BE could hamper, or our own transformation goals could hamper investment. How are you able to match it?
Well, I mean, in terms of the discussions that we've had, and when you speak to sort of investors at this scale, They have a very good understanding of the dynamics of the country, our history, what BE is looking to achieve, how the regulations and the regulatory framework works. And what you find is that their concern is less to do with the sort of policies that we put in place rather than the consistency of those policies. Because if there's an element of consistency in terms of the policies, business is capable of responding to those and pricing it in if needs be, right? In terms of making a decision of South Africa versus Namibia versus Morocco versus somewhere else, Mauritius. So that element around consistency is one that we focus on rather than necessarily sort of the policy element. But like I said, the core one around sort of which sectors we ended up with was you can't drive these things within a policy vacuum. You have to overlay what is the intentionality of government, in the way in which it is approaching this investment promotion and facilitation. And it is within our current framework of legislation and legislative priorities. So I don't get a sort of huge pushback on sort of things like BEE. I think that's well understood and well priced. And then on those where there's less certainty, the quicker we can give certainty and be consistent in its application are the important elements.
So I'll go through into the chat and I will limit my video. Oh, on the chat, we had a question, which I can't see it right now anymore. I don't know why, maybe the gentleman took it off. He was asking why didn't you write the strategy to be focused per province instead of nationwide and sort of segmented by province and segmented for the whole country?
So there are already IPAs that operate at a provincial level. They have their individual provincial strategies. But if you're an investor from overseas, and even in some cases, one in South Africa, what you want to understand is what the South African offering is, and then drill down to where the best place to locate that business is, rather than the other way around. Rather than, I want to locate in Cape Town, and now what is it that I want to do in Cape Town? I think it's sort of more the other way around. So what the role the national strategy then does is creates this framework around approach and creates this framework around what we see from a country level as being sort of key areas for future development in terms of the nascent industries, as well as areas of focus at an individual sector level. Talks about what are we looking to do from a incentive perspective, and then draws down to potentially where are the best places to be able to locate such opportunities based on the location quotient. So naturally, I guess it follows the other way around. If there is a particular interest in a particular area for some reason, those strategies already exist in terms of the investment promotion agencies that operate in all of the provinces, and what they produce on an annual basis in terms of the work that they do at their focus areas. So the individual sort of IPA view already exists. IPA is an investment promotion agency.
Yeah, thank you for that. When we look at the CIS implementation structure, it's sort of headed in the Presidency. Is there a reason for it to sit there, not maybe in a different department, like perhaps trade and industry as an implementing or policy department? And can you take us through why the reasoning to put it through to the Presidency?
So like I said, the Presidency now has this function called the Investment and Infrastructure Office. And one of its roles from the investment side is A, to support the work of the special investment envoys, those preeminent South Africans who the president has called on to assist from a country duty perspective in terms of promoting South Africa as an investment destination. So the likes of Jacko Marais, Trevor Manuel, Derek Hanekom, and others. And then sort of the work around the South African Investment Conference and the pledges working up to the 1.2 trillion rand. And then the other component of it is this element around creating this coordination around the work of the IPAs, working closely with the likes of Invest SA, which sits in our Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as the likes of Brand SA, which sits under one of the entities of the presidency already. And what you need, because this element of investment promotion is cross-cutting and multi-sectoral, is a place where it can sit, where the different departments can be, and IPAs can be convened and coordinated. So it's not looking to usurp their individual policy mandates. You can't, as presidency, then come in and tell Department of Mineral Resources and Energy what to do on energy policy. But what you have the opportunity to do is create this element of coordination and convening of the different players, and if necessary, mediation between the different parties. So you can imagine investment promotion looks at issues that affect everything from red tape to when it still existed, things like how easy is it to do business in South Africa for a small, medium enterprise trying to set up different types of operations. And that will have an impact at a metro level on construction permits, for instance, and rezoning. And it would have an impact on provincial level for things like your environmental impact assessment, and could have an impact at a national level for a water use license, for instance. So that element of convening and coordinating is what presidency is looking to do. It's not looking to effectively sort of usurp the powers of the different policy departments. And if needs be, to mediate.
Okay, I understand. Will you take us through that your idea on monitoring and evaluation? If the Office of the Presidency is the one sort of overseeing and coordinating implementation, what is your view? I know you have a section on it on 11.4. Just take us through the thinking on who then monitors your own, who assesses your work streams. Would you be doing it yourselves?
So ultimately, the first thing to do in terms of the implementation is to put the structures in place that then create the detail around the country investment strategy. So what it's creating is this framework for coordination and collaboration, rather than and pulling in the voices of the different IPAs in terms of how that's done. And what it initially proposes is 5 work streams. So the first one being one around championing support and coordination. The second one around sector prioritization and alignment. The third one around strategic investment opportunities and the 5 big frontiers. Another one around policy, regulatory, and financing. I think we sort of spoke to it in the beginning. I can't remember if it was in the meeting or outside the meeting, of the importance of having a conducive environment in which investment needs to land. And then ultimately, investment promotion and facilitation. So it's looking at the full ambit of those. And it has sort of plans that it sets in terms of a review after the short term, which is within a year, and the sort of immediate actions that would be set for each of those work streams. And then secondly, around the longer term plans and the building of this sort of shared vision and understanding through the work of these individual streams, pulling in the individual sort of policy owners into it. Sort of part of this initial work is around creating and championing and broadly communicating around and creating awareness around the country investment strategy. So in terms of the implementation, it would be sort of on a 360 basis. All the different players would be sitting around the table, and you'd be able to sort of see the monitoring, and through the individual streams call into, sort of call on different IPAs and departments where sort of non-performance is happening, and it would then sort of flow up and report into the presidency. So the presidency from that role would be the one doing that monitoring and evaluation of the work of the individual policy departments, because like I said, it doesn't hold the individual policy mandate, and nor could it usurp it from the individual departments. But what it can play the role of is, this convening and coordinating and ultimately mediating. Sort of second to that, we'd said sort of how do you embed this document so that it becomes a lived reality is, through public monitoring and evaluation. There's a department that does this, and including these elements and this work and the outputs into the APPs of the different departments and structures. And then DPME would then be in the role of monitoring its implementation against targets on a sort of ongoing basis. So it's not looking, I guess, it is creating a new structure, but it's trying to create it within the framework of how government already works.
Okay, thank you very much. That was clear, and it sort of clears some of the concerns that we had. One of the questions that we had.
Sorry,
Sure.
to Bata Nonku. One of the things that we'd love to receive, though, is sort of a detailed written sort of submission. And we're encouraging this from all of the sort of members that you have on the on this sort of video chat or live streaming, and from yourselves, and the ones that are much more likely to be absorbed are the ones that are quite specific, not a sort of generalist comment, but, with regards to section 1, 2, 3, 4, we think it could be strengthened like this or like that, or, we don't agree with the premise of this, or, what this document actually needs is a much punchier executive summary that's 10 pages. And if I'm an investor, and if that's all I'm going to read, I need to be able to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away from that. And, you've got info here in this document that speaks to metros and provinces, but it can't be a document that you're constantly updating sort of every year. So we suggest that moves into annexures, or those become sort of online elements that you can, something sort of specific. I'm not trying to give you ideas on how to improve the document, but would love to sort of get a written response and something sort of quite tangible that one is then able to sort of chew on, rather than, we think it's a rubbish document.
No, I understand fully what you say. So part of our role as PRC is to respond to policy and sort of guide the BMF position. We write quite comprehensive feedback and documents, which then we pass on to our board. And then once that's signed off, we definitely send it through for as a BMF position. So the role of tonight is really to get your thoughts and get the members to hear your thinking and how this came about. We then collate all of their thoughts and inputs from branches, and then we come up with a comprehensive BMF position or response to the strategy. So that's normally our role.
Great, thanks for clarifying that for me. But yeah, looking forward to receiving sort of substantive written input.
Yes, no, thank you very much. On the goals, it's what us as the PRC discussed. On the NDP goals it's a target of 30% of investment to GDP by 2030. I know you don't call it investment there, you call it gross fixed capital. It's the same thing. Your strategy is far less than the 30%. And do you want to let us know why is that?
So the strategy speaks to what the current economic reality is. And the current economic reality is a scenario where gross fixed capital formation sort of pre-COVID was just under 18%, 17.8 if I'm not mistaken. It's fallen now to around 15%. So it's half of what is in the NDP, and we don't change the target in the NDP. The NDP target is 30%, it remains 30%. That is what we are chasing from a government perspective. What it does then sort of point out is also what the employment trends have been over the last 10 years and before, as well as what we anticipated, because I guess sort of COVID has hit all of us, and how we anticipated that the recovery in a COVID environment would look, and when we expected to sort of get back to sort of pre-COVID levels. It then sort of points to two things, which I'm sure you're also sort of wrestling with, which is, but the difference between a 18% level of gross fixed capital formation, which is where we were sort of in a pre-COVID environment, and what the National Development Plan looks at, which is 30%. And 30% correlates, because there's a sort of correlation between levels of gross fixed capital formation and GDP growth, correlates to about a 5% level of GDP growth. And the NDP has us chasing a level of about 5.6%. But the difference, though, in terms of actual investment is somewhere then around our current levels, which are around 900 billion rand a year, versus the sort of targeted levels, which require us to fill the gap of an additional 600 billion rand a year. So in that sense, what the NDP then has us looking at is a investment gap of around 600 billion rand a year, or a total of around 3 trillion rand a year over the sort of term of this administration. So when we look at things like the pipeline of projects, etc., and levels of commitments of in terms of the South African Investment Conference and investment promotion, ultimately this is the number that we keep in the back of our minds. And what we're looking to do is to sort of build up a pipeline of projects which are strong enough to be able to tap on and draw down on funding from the fiscus and private sector players, including the DFIs and multilateral development banks, which allows us to sort of reach this level. This is an aside, it's not something that is sort of specified in the document. Sort of the challenge that we have is also around the ability of the state to, I mean, this government has been quite forthright around how core engineering and financial engineering skills have been hemorrhaged from the fiscus over the last 10 years, and created this need to create a partnership with the private sector to almost second these specialized skills in terms of the preparation of projects. So when the Investment and Infrastructure Office ran the first Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium of South Africa, so SIDS-SA, which was in June 2020, we had worked on a pipeline of projects which were 277 submissions and amounted to, I think it was around 2.7 trillion rand of of pipeline investment. What we are able to take through assessment and ultimately assess as being at a investable grade, not necessarily all at financial close, because certain projects were looking for project preparation funding, etc., was 50 projects. An additional 12 projects was added as part of the presidential employment stimulus. But looking at the core ones that went through this methodology, and the methodology is to take projects that have an element of a revenue stream, because then they are able to attract some type of funding, package those for private sector participation. If they're able to meet the hurdle rates on a standalone basis and the risk profile on a standalone basis, then great. If they aren't, use the infrastructure fund, which is blended finance instrument, and was effectively sort of brought into operation about a year and a half ago. And the three parties to it are the Investment and Infrastructure Office, or Infrastructure South Africa, Treasury, and the DBSA. And it's seeded with a 100 billion rand of funding from the Treasury over 10 years to apply that to meet that gap in the risk and return profile for projects that don't meet sort of those market rates on a standalone basis. And then to only then send to the fiscus projects that are of more of a social nature. So of those in execution, you have 29 of them are in development or at a procurement stage. So you still have this sort of gap of projects that, though 60% of the pipeline in less than a year is now sort of in development, the rest that you need to sort of bring to that point. But there's a huge backlog of other projects that need sort of additional project preparation and assessment work to be done. So that speaks to this level of the gap and why sort of there's this differential around this levels of gross fixed capital formation and what we're targeting around the 30%. That's quite a long explanation, but but we're not changing the target that's in the NDP.
Right.
So the NDP is almost like our shining light, our lighthouse. That's what we're sort of responding to and trying to achieve. We're not changing the numbers that are in there.
Yes, and it sounds like it's well thought and it's a realistic goal that you put now in the strategy.
Sure.
What we like is that the projects are continuing with or without the strategy being signed off. You've done a lot of work in the sector that I'm in, and I think I'll speak to the question that Tebogo on the Q&A asked, Tebogo Mokwana. The leader asked there, for ordinary citizens that have special projects, is he able to bring investors, or how does he get access to investors? So I'll just substantiate that on my side and my other cap that I wear. In the green technology, we know that the technology is not available in the country. So if I identify a technology partner anywhere in the world, would this fit into the strategy, and how will this strategy assist?
Yeah, so if we go back to sort of what is the strategy looking to do? So one, it's sending a market signal, right? And if you take the sector that you and Tebogo have both raised, let's say renewables, as an example, it puts sort of renewables front and center in terms of putting things like green hydrogen at the center of our nascent industry approach, and puts manufacturing from, let's say, a localization perspective as one of the existing industries that meets those elements of the assessment in terms of economic impact, plus the overlay in terms of policy. So you're talking the right thing. It would be something else if you wanted to bring an investor in and create balloons. I don't know. It's a silly example, but so we're now aligned. We have a strategy that is supporting your marketing effort, because it says yes, South Africa is very interested and sees opportunity within the sector. Then the next thing that it does is, if you sort of look at something like green hydrogen, it creates that economies of scale for the development of renewable energies beyond the levels of fulfilling our needs from a self-generation perspective. It's like, how do we create a commodity that is tradable and turns renewable energy into something that can be stored and shipped or used in manufacturing type processes? Yeah. So we have the Northern Cape Green Hydrogen Strategy puts forward a target, and I'd use this as an early example, so let me sort of bed down on it, sets a target of having 5 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity under development by 2030. No, under development by 2026, in production by 2030. So 5 gigawatts of renewable energy would be supported, 5 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity would be supported by about 10 gigawatts of renewable energy. It then puts as the 2040 target, having 40 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity under development. So those sound like a year ago, sort of pie in the sky type of numbers, within a context where sort of throughout the world currently produces only around, I think it's around 250,000 tons of green hydrogen a year. So these are projects that even on a standalone basis would be looking to be producing more than that sort of gigawatt scale.
Yeah, wow.
But that 40 gigawatts is supported by 80 gigawatts of renewable energy.
Yes.
So in our pipeline now of projects that have gone through sort of initial sort of assessment, most of them, like other gigawatt scale projects in the rest of the world, are sort of at a pre-feasibility level or just finished pre-feasibility going into sort of proper project preparation, aiming for financial close by sort of end of next year. We have a pipeline of projects that makes up about 20 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. So that would be supported, sorry, not 20 gigawatts, 40 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. So what the Northern Cape had hoped to achieve by 2040, because also the market in the space has moved quite quickly, and would be supported by 80 gigawatts of renewable energy, which is, almost twice our installed capacity and, almost 3 times what we can produce on a day-to-day basis. So all of these things would align to support why we would support you from a country perspective, and why we would support Tebogo talking to technology partners and others and OEMs who want to set up locations and production facilities in country. It's that message that is supporting, yes, South Africa really is behind developments within XYZ sector.
Yeah. Okay. And then if Tebogo has, would you do an investor and a project matching exercise? If Tebogo has a project and hasn't found an investor, but he doesn't have access to know from your side which investors are ready to do business with us, would you do an investor sort of matching project exercise?
So we have the IPAs and departments that sort of do that for the different provinces, the different districts, the different sort of metros. For something like green hydrogen specifically, we are looking at having a country conference and sort of inviting the world to come to us to be able to create those local connections, sort of as early maybe as November this year. But I think sort of once we bed down something like that, we could sort of come back to you guys and share information on that.
Okay, but at this stage, you can speak to his provincial investment promotion agency.
Speak to your IPA around that, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I know we don't have much time. It was just you and I speaking. Itumeleng, members have is there any hands or anybody who has a question directly?
No, we don't have any questions.
Okay.
Have
No,
either
thank you
been
very
very clear or very unclear?
No, I think you're very clear, and it was a pleasure really speaking to you. It was clear, and I think it took us on the journey. And the fact that you're not always in government, you were able to speak in a way that private sector or us in the outside of government would understand.
No, thank you for that. And like I said, I'm happy to engage at forums like this. And if you feel it's appropriate, please pull us in. We'll share what our thinking is, what we're trying to do, what we have in the pipeline, etc., etc.
Thank you. We've got a leader from Northern Cape asking a question, but Daryl, I would like you to speak directly on the forum. Are you able to, Itumeleng, are you able to unmute it, Daryl?
Good day, Nonku.
Oh, hi. Hi, leader.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for joining us. And we're talking about your province a lot today, since the president is interested in your province.
Yes, I went through the strategy and I was shocked when I read the Northern Cape part that apparently we are home to the metropolitan city of Cape Town. So I was shocked, with that national document, things like that. So it means we really need to work as the Northern Cape so that people can understand what the Northern Cape is about and all of the opportunities. But my question is with regard to, sometimes we talk investments, but we don't look at the requisite skills that are needed and investing in those future skills. Because we only concentrate on the current ones like your mining and so on. And some of these lifespan of these mines are around 2034, which is around the corner. So is the skills agenda part of the investment strategy? Basically, that's what I wanted to find out so that we can see how we can fit that into that so that we can have the appropriate skills when it comes, because the Northern Cape as it is, the unemployment is so high because even the youth are unemployable because they don't have the necessary skills. So I think part of the strategy needs to have all of these skills. So maybe if Ntate Moshweshwe can just, highlight if the skills agenda are part of the investment that we need to be doing rather than just the investment on the opportunities. Thank you.
Can I come in, Nonku?
Yes, please. Yes, please do.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Daryl, for that question. There's either a lot of lows in the Northern Cape, but the acting CEO of the Northern Cape Economic Development Agency is another low, a Hendrik low. So anyway, the first one is, I've read the strategy. I've missed where we've said the Northern Cape, Cape Town is in the Northern Cape. If it does say that, 1,000 apologies. We will definitely fix it. You don't have to put that as a written commentary to us. We will fix it based on this verbal input. From a skills perspective, the skills question is always asked because, when we talk about these nascent sectors and existing sectors and the ability to sort of turn these opportunities into tangibles, you need the requisite skills from a country perspective, as well as a plan on how we are going to develop these skills, especially for new industries. So on some of the nascent sectors, we have an advantage because some of the initial work that was done on things like green hydrogen was led by the Department of Science and Innovation, which is now Science and Innovation, as well as higher education. So that linkage from a research perspective, from an IP perspective, how that gets translated into sort of tangible business opportunities, what are the skills that are required, and a strategy around how that is done already exists in some of the sort of strategy document that underpins some of the nascent industries like your Hydrogen Society Roadmap, which was developed by DSI and issued gazetted by Cabinet earlier this year. But yes, there is a big sort of skills focus because, the implementability of these plans would not exist without there being a development of the necessary skills. Maybe I didn't sort of focus on it enough in the beginning, which was the type of development that we're trying to create is one which is labor absorptive, because South Africa does have a history of non-labor absorptive growth. So in order to be able to absorb that labor, it means that you need to sort of give people the necessary skills in order to participate in these elements of the new economy. So it is a focus area of the strategy, as well as the other sort of underpinning policies that support some of the nascent sectors that are sort of identified in the strategy. If there's a commentary around how that could be sort of strengthened on or based on sort of BMFs and your members' sort of experience, we'd love to get that input, So no, I think there should be a specific working group or focus from a skills perspective, or whatever form it is that you may take. We'd love to get sort of ideas on how you think that element could be expanded on. Thanks.
No, thank you so much for answering that. We are a lot over time, I think over 10 minutes. So that's how much we enjoyed, and we're so engaged in this. Thank you again for the strategy, and thank you for understanding really what investors want. You spoke about trade openness, efficiency of government regulation, and alignment. And I think we are on a good track to go there. You'll definitely be receiving up our comments as a Black Management Forum.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting me, and for the opportunity to engage. And hopefully this is one of many such future engagements between ourselves and yourselves. No, certainly. Leaders, thank you so much for those who joined us and stayed the course with us. We look forward to your comments. As you know, as per process, you send your comments through to your branch, and it will get to us, and we will create a document for input, and it's a position document from the BMF. But thank you so much for your engagement, and thank you again for working so hard towards the country and seeing your role individually as how to take this country forward, and how we can all recover from COVID and create the necessary jobs and a robust economy. Tata Masupa, thank you so much for your help. Itumeleng, thank you for all the help, and apologies again for all the glitches. Hopefully when this is done, we won't have so much load shedding that day, Msheshe. Yeah, hopefully you're going to build a lot more renewable energy plants and help us meet the 5 to 6 gigawatts of electricity shortfall that we have at the moment. So in every cloud there's a silver lining, and hopefully business can respond to that. No, so we certainly will. Thank you, and have a good evening, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you. Good evening. All right. Cheers. Bye.